Hey, how's it going? It's been a while. I hope you've had a good time. I didn't have such a good time. I spent 9.5 weeks in prison here in Ukraine. I've been out on bail since July 6th. Today is July 31st. And to prove the time, I just checked on my subscription. Defense Politics Asia, which is a pretty good channel, just put out a video called Niger on the Brink of Regional War. That should prove the time that I'm recording this video. Now, at the same time that I'm posting this video, I'm posting a long thread on my Twitter account. My Twitter account is Gonzalo Lira 1968. Gonzalo Lira 1968, one word altogether. And in that, I discuss what has happened to me over the past 3 months in some detail. I also include the indictment against me that I'm going to be tried on. I'm going to be tried on Wednesday, August 2nd, the day after tomorrow, as a matter of fact. I posted both the original Ukraine language version and the translation. The translation was by the court-appointed translator, so I have no idea if it's accurate or not. Those of you who speak Ukraine will be able to give a better sense as to whether that translation is accurate, but that's besides the point. I put up the entire indictment in both the original and the translation so that you can see exactly what I was charged with and imprisoned for. Now, the charges are very serious because the penalty is 5 to 8 years in a prison labor camp. I'm 55 years old, and some of you may know I have a fairly serious heart condition. I'm not going to survive 5 to 8 years. And I've already been told by people who would know that I will be found guilty. And because of circumstances, it would be convenient for me to serve out that sentence, for me to basically disappear. Disappear in a prison labor camp and, potentially die there, either naturally or unnaturally, as the case may be. Now, in the tweet thread, I go into more or less what happened. I composed that tweet thread last night. It took me 2 hours to do it because there was a lot of information and, keeping it to 25 tweets, it's tough. But anyway, the upshot is that I was accused of being a pro-Russian propagandist, basically, cut through the legalese, it was basically that. I was also accused of denying the Russian invasion, which is laughable. I mean, I've always said that the Russians invaded. It's self-evident, I never denied that fact. They said that I was justifying this invasion that was unprovoked, and of course, we all know that it was provoked. It didn't come out of the blue. It wasn't that the Russians one day decided, hey, let's just invade Ukraine. No, it was provoked, and I gave a very detailed explanation as to why it was provoked in a video that really chapped the ass of the prosecutor's office, apparently. The video of mine called Ukraine a Primer, which of course goes into the backstory and the history of relations between these two countries and why they wound up going to war as they are currently embroiled in. So anyway, the point is I'm going to be found guilty. And because of things that happened, corruption and extortion that happened in prison against me, I will be found guilty. I will not get a suspended sentence. I will have to serve out my term and likely die in this prison labor camp. Shit. Sorry, hang on. Sorry about that. I don't have 3 hands. Anyway, so realizing that my court date is the day after tomorrow, and realizing some other information that was quite strange, I was granted bail after innumerable hurdles, because when I was originally arrested, I was nominally supposed to get a lawyer, have access to a lawyer, be able to call my loved ones and arrange for bail. Now, insofar as lawyers, I have lawyers up the wazoo. Insofar as loved ones, not as many as lawyers, but I have quite a few that I care about very deeply, most especially my small children. For those of you who don't know, I have 2 children. Veronica, who is 10, she just turned 10. She turned 10 while I was in prison. And my son Ramon, who is 8. And of course, I wanted to talk to them, but I was not allowed to speak to them during the entirety of my stay in prison. And of course, I wasn't allowed to post bail, even though I had the means to post bail. Now, let me explain that situation, which was very interesting. You see, nominally, on the first day that I was arrested, I could have posted bail. But I was not given the opportunity to do so, to contact the people who would have the cash available to post my bail. It wasn't that much, it was $11,000, which I don't want to sound arrogant. $11,000 is quite a bit of money for most people. I am blessed by the good fortune of having the means to put together that kind of money at a moment's notice. And so I could have posted bail on the very first day, but the authorities simply didn't allow me to do it, even though they said I could. Now, I was imprisoned briefly for 2 nights. I was in interrogatory prison number 1, that's the name of it. And then after that, I spent the remaining 9 weeks, exactly 9 weeks, in CISO prison, which is also an investigative prison. And that is a prison where individuals who have been accused of a crime are held while their case is investigated by either the police or the SBU who has arrested them. The SBU, for those of you who don't know, is the State Security Services of Ukraine. They are basically the descendants of the KGB, okay? So anyway, I wasn't allowed to post bail, and it was only through fairly heroic measures and a lot of pressure, political pressure from the government of Chile and apparently the State Department as well, because they didn't seem to like the fact that I wasn't being allowed to post bail. I spoke with representatives of the U.S. Embassy 3 times during the 9 weeks I was there. And they just gave me bromides. They made no effort to pull me out, you know. I mean, if only I'd been a black lesbian druggie or a transgender grifter, then maybe they would have done something. Well, no, if I'd been one of those 2 things, I would have been out instantly. But of course, since I'm not, and since a couple of people who would know have told me that Vicky Newland actually knows about me and hates my guts. So there you go. So anyway, the point is, there was the appearance of unfairness, so eventually I was allowed to post bail. But the bail conditions were very interesting because I had to surrender my passports. I had to wear an electronic monitor. I wasn't allowed to leave the city of Kharkov or the country. And they also confiscated, of course, all of my computers, my iPad, my iPhone. They also confiscated about $9,000 that I had as emergency cash, you know, the kind of cash you have around just in case of anything. Well, they confiscated that. And they confiscated a bunch of my documents, specifically my driver's license, my Chilean identity card, and the registration cards for my motorcycles. I don't own a car, by the way. And so I was told in no uncertain terms that I had to stay in Kharkov and not leave the city under any circumstances, and of course not leave the country. And I would get this ankle monitor, and I would have to surrender my passports. But when I posted bail and was released, my passports were returned to me. I didn't get any kind of ankle monitor. And a few days later, I went to the SBU offices of the investigator who had investigated my case. And he returned my driver's license, my Chilean ID card, and my registration documents for my motorcycles. As you can see, there's my bike. I don't know if you can see it properly. There you go. And so this was very interesting to me. Now, last year, I was detained by the SBU, also for videos that were very critical of what was going on. And they investigated me because they thought, curiously enough, that I was some sort of Russian agent. Okay, of course, I'm not a Russian agent, you know. And I'm just a regular guy living in Ukraine who saw what was happening, was horrified by this war, and thought that the only solution was to sue for peace because it's inevitable. Because if, you know, if a man such as myself, 55 years old, 83 kilos, not in the best of shape, gets in the ring with Mike Tyson in his prime, I mean, we know how it's going to end, right? Yeah, that was pretty much the situation insofar as the Ukraine and Russian conflict is concerned. And perhaps I did not emphasize this enough in my videos, but the purpose of my videos was to point out how horrifying the war was, how detrimental to the Ukraine people and the Ukrainian nation it was, and the only solution was to find a peace settlement of some sort, of any sort, to prevent the complete destruction of the Ukraine nation and the Ukraine people. Well, that happened. About a third of the population of Ukraine has left the country. 20% of it is controlled and will be annexed by the Russians, and there's no doubt in my mind that they intend to capture much more territory of the Ukraine nation, probably up to the Dnieper River, and take everything east of it, and that will include Odessa, of course, and Ukraine will be broken. It's inevitable at this point, unfortunately. But anyway, the point that I wanted to make is that last year I was detained. I was investigated to see if I was a Russian agent. They realized I wasn't. And I was let go. But I was told in no uncertain terms that I could not leave the city or the country while my case was investigated. And me being a very law-abiding citizen, because the extent of my criminal career up to this point was that in New York City in the year 2000, I was living in Lower Manhattan, and I had a dog, and I would walk the dog without a leash. And one time I got a ticket, $50, which I didn't pay. That's the extent of my law-breaking career. I'm very much a person who believes in civil society and following the rules and following the law. And so I was told that I couldn't leave the country, I couldn't leave the city even, which I wanted to because I wanted to be near my family. So I was a good boy. Later in prison, in CISO, I told this to some of the other prisoners there, because they're not inmates, because none of them have been convicted. Their cases are all being investigated, and some of these investigations take years, plural. Okay, one man I knew had been there for, as he said very proudly, 3 years and 3 months. Another had been there 6 years. Because what they do is that they arrest you and charge you, and they start their investigation, and they'll get around to the investigation when they get around to it. So a lot of times people just sit there forever. And that's basically the justice system in Ukraine. So anyway, the point is that my case was expedited. Prisoners couldn't believe that my case was investigated in a month, exactly a month. By the 31st of May, they had completed their investigation of me being this evil Russian propagandist, and the indictment was drawn up, which, as I said, you can read on Twitter, and the thread that I posted at the same time that I'm posting this video. And where was I? I lost my train of thought. Yeah, when I was in prison, and I told the other prisoners how I'd been detained in April of 22, and told in no uncertain terms not to leave the country, the prisoners laughed, and they said, "You idiot. They were leaving the door open for you to leave. They wanted you to leave. You know, less hassle for them." And me, of course, you know, retrospectively, it's obvious, but at the time, I said, no, I can't do anything. They're telling me to stay, so I must stay, you know, like an idiot. That's simple as that. So anyway, insofar as my current, status of being out on bail, and The judge was very clear that it was very explicit. I couldn't leave the city, I couldn't leave the country, and I had to surrender my passports. I have two, the American and Chilean. And of course, they also confiscated these documents for my transportation. And yet, when I was released on bail, they gave me all the stuff back. They didn't put the electronic monitor, and they allowed me to keep my passports. And what's more,